Um, so now we are going to, hang on, let me get my things in order. What's going on here? Okay. So, um, to give my talk tonight the title, my talk is titled Focus on the Why and God Will Handle the How. And tonight's talk will also be a short-ish talk. So let me explain that one a bit. So when I was thinking about how to write this talk, I tried to find different stories. I started from, the anchor scripture for this theme is lies in the story of David and Goliath. And I thought I'd try to find different stories that would support the message. But every time I tried to use a supporting story, like maybe you could talk about Mary and Martha, or maybe you could talk about Gideon and pleasing the Lord. I found that they would pull the talk in different directions, and I kept coming back to, well, David and Goliath. And after dwelling on this story a bit more, I realized that the message that I wanted to draw out from this story and share with everyone tonight is actually quite strong, and it's enough to stand on its own without having to draw from elsewhere. And I do enjoy the the framing of the story. It's quite a dramatic and enjoyable story to read and tell. So let's hear it. Let's start it from the top. We're going to start from verse 1. And 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 1. Now it says here, I think everybody gets the gist, but I want to frame it so that we all understand the context better. So it starts here in verse 1. Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle and were gathered at this place called Socho, which belongs to Judah. It doesn't belong to doesn't belong to the Philistines, so they've invaded and they encamped between this place. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. So they were getting ready for battle and everything. The Philistines stood on the mountain one side, and Israel stood on the other side with a valley between them. And a champion went up from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath. Yep, we all know him. From Gath, and whose height was 6 cubits and a span. So I did try to quickly look up what his height was, and what 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 uh what Goliath's height really is. And there is some debate on it online, historical debate, but two numbers came up, 2 meters and 2.9 meters. And no matter how you look at it, I can basically paraphrase the next three verses as Goliath is a big, scary soldier. Yeah, so we're going to skip all that to verse 8 and it says, and he stood up and cried out to the armies of Israel. And he said to them, why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we shall be your servants. But if I prevail, then you shall be your servants and serve us. So this is framing the concept of single combat rather than everybody trying to kill each other. Just you pick your best guy, I pick my best guy, and then we duke it out. And from there, we know who won. We know which army wins by extension. And verse 10, okay, so verse 10 is a key phrase for this story. Is a key verse for the story. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. I just want to put a point on, well, let's roll back a little bit. In verse 8, it says here, am I not a Philistine and you the servants of Saul? There's no God in this picture for him. So anyway, that's just a side point. So back to verse 10, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. Now, verse 11, when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. They took the bait, right? They forgot that they were serving, that they thought they forgot that they were serving God and not Saul. Let's put it that way. Now, comes our main character. Now, our main character in a way, yeah. Now David as was the son of so and so, was of Jesse. The man was, well, he was an old man. And three of this old man's sons had gone to follow Saul to the battle. David was the youngest, he didn't go. But David occasionally went back and forth to be like the errand boy. He would deliver stuff back and forth to the brothers, or well, to check out and see what's going on lah. Uh, Skipping on to verse 16, and the Philistine drew near and presented himself 40 days. This guy was challenging Israel. And verse 17, one fine day, Jesse says to his son David, now take some grain and these loaves, run to your brothers at the camp, give these cheeses to the captain of their 1,000, see how your brothers fare and bring back news of them. So he's going there to check, to see what's going on and then bring back a report. So he rose in the morning, he left his sheep with a keeper. He's a responsible guy. And he took the things and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to the fight and shouting for the battle. So it was very noisy. There was a lot of noise going on, but no actual fighting. There was a lot of noise. For Israel and the Philistines had drawn up in battle array. So they were all standing there. They were getting ready, but there wasn't actually any fighting yet. And David left his supplies, ran to the army, came and greeted his brothers. So David, he was kind of pedestrian to this situation. He just showed up, he just got here. And as he talked with them, there was the champion, right, on the other side, and coming up from the armies of the Philistines, and he spoke according to the same word. So he came up and he started challenging the armies of it, he started challenging Israel, all the men of Israel. And David heard it and he asked, and sorry, he hasn't done the asking yet. In verse 24, and all the men of Israel, when they saw this guy, they fled from him and they were dreadfully afraid. So the men of Israel said, verse 25, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. So in verse 26, David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? So you see, he's starting to ask a different question, right? He's the only one for some reason, he's the only one who seems to realize that, Israel has God's favor, right? Israel is God's chosen. I mean, I don't see it in I don't see mention of God anywhere else. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him in this manner, saying, so shall it be done for the man who kills him. And now we have come to the anchor scripture, which says here, now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was aroused against David, and he said, why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. Now, look at the context here. David literally just showed up, and he saw and he sees this big scary guy come down and start challenging the armies of Israel. And then he asks, like, what are we gonna do about this guy? We have to do something about this guy, right? That's all he's saying. And then his brother comes along and tells him to stick to his corner or go home, basically. Now, even before, and we know eventually that David faces off against Goliath and eventually defeats him. He had to face something else first. He had to face his brother. He had to face, well, specifically, discouragement from his own brother. And sometimes the first giant that you have to fight is not the giant, it's not the literal giant in front of you, it's the voices around you, or maybe if you let them get into you, inside you. Because our sometimes our opposition doesn't come from the challenge of actually doing God's work, but moving yourself into a position where, you know, mentally, spiritually, where you can do God's work. And sometimes and I think many of us who have been in the Lord for a good time, we would know that when we set our heart to want to do something for God, that we will encounter, I mean, trials along the way. David didn't just face Goliath that day, he faced a battle between his own brother. He even faced it against King Saul himself, because King Saul was like, look, you're just a kid, how are you gonna you're just a kid. This guy has been fighting since he was a kid. And this Goliath probably has been a warrior since he was a kid. We'll see that later. He faced the battle between all that, and even from the men, because even from the men throughout the encampment that he asked, because they were all terrified and they could not see the power of God that could have worked through them. And David even had to overcome the evidence of his own eyes. He can see that the guy is a scary guy, and all these hostile responses around him, and he had to focus instead on what God's cause was. So one question here I want to try and answer tonight is, how did David deal with all this? So let's look into it. Let's go to verse 29, and it says there, what have I, and David said, what have I done now? Is there not a cause? And then he turned from him towards another and said the same thing, and these people answered him as the first ones did. So what I just want to, before I touch on what David did, I want to make it clear first that David's brother Eliab, he misjudged David 100%. He called David proud, insolent, but David was faithful, yet he was full of God's faith. And Eliab also accused David of, well, basically selfish motives, right? Maybe it's like you want to get some glory out of this, but David cared that God's name was being dishonored here. I mean, if you look, has David volunteered to fight Goliath himself for any glory? No, he has not. He hasn't even volunteered until later on, like where is that? Verse 32, but we'll get to that in a bit. But the danger for David here is that he could have dwelt on it. He could have let it get to his head. He could have it's quite the thought that your cause is wrong, that perhaps you were not doing it for God. Perhaps you were doing it because of all these earthly riches or rewards. That can be quite a dangerous thought to dwell on. So what we see here instead is that David did not let those accusations take root. He didn't engage with them. He did not let those words gain power over him. His focus was on the cause. And when you do that, everything else starts to grow dim, strangely dim, Everything else seems to become kind of irrelevant. Maybe you've felt this one in the past as well. I mean, maybe you've wanted to do something that you felt was so important, so compelling, that everything else grows strangely dim in comparison, because that's all you can think about. And I know personally I felt it in the past. I'm sure you can. I'm sure you would have too, if you think back. And anyway, it was likewise when David did this, it became irrelevant whether he was doing it for pride's sake or whether he wanted a great reward. So what if some part of him wanted a nice reward? What if some part of him wanted riches? Who wouldn't want riches? But the important thing that mattered was that David wanted to honor God, and that's all it meant. That's all it was to him. That's all it meant to him. Now, we're going to continue on to the second thing that David did to steel himself for the cause. So we're going to continue to verse 33. We'll roll back, verse 31 first. Now when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul, and he sent for him. Then David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of, well, this guy, this Goliath. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And verse 33, and Saul said to David, "Nah, you're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth." Now, you think about it from this perspective. If we're talking about single combat here, champion versus champion, and Saul is kind of being the gatekeeper for whether the armies of Israel lose or the Philistines lose, or well, whether he wins or the Philistines win, you know. So he has every reason to be doubtful about what he's looking at in front of his eyes. That's why he says these things. You're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth. But David said to Saul, this is the part which this is the part which David uses to steel himself, to steel those around him. "Your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing as he has defied the armies of the living God." Moreover, David said, right, and this is another aspect of it. "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." So he acknowledges, not only does he acknowledge that God is the one who is giving him all these victories, these overcomings, right? He is telling Saul and everyone in the room that he knows that the Lord will continue to do this because he's done it before. So David has demonstrated that he understood his relationship with God. Now, we use the word relationship. You gotta build up your relationship with God. And why do we call it a relationship? You know, why the word relationship? It's a relationship. If you look in the dictionary, it's about how you engage with someone or something. You know, we have our relationship with our work, but that's aside. We have our relationship with parents, right? We all have parents, right? So when you were young, and when you asked your parents for something, did they give it to you or not? You know, that's how you and from there you learn. Did they give it to you only after you did something back for them? Did they give it to you on some condition? You know, you must do your homework, or you must go and you must behave yourself throughout the day. Then maybe I'll go and buy ice cream for you or something like that. You know, uh, but when you engage with your parents long enough, let's say, you start to learn the patterns behind your exchanges with them when you talk with them. So you begin to learn the principles that they uphold, the values they uphold, and then you start to understand what your parents want from you. You begin to understand them better. You begin to have a better relationship with them, and that's what our relationship with God that parallels a relation. That's a relationship, you know. Likewise, when we have our relation, when we build up our relationship with God, we walk with Him. You know, it's not a one-off thing. You pray, you ask, you ask for sign, maybe you ask for results, you ask for an overcoming, and some you receive, some you don't receive, some perhaps you don't get some overcoming sometimes. But the point is, you build it up over time, and then you start to understand perhaps maybe what you should be asking for God, from God, things like that. That's how you build up a relationship. Now, David had that relationship. He built up his faith in God over time. God delivered him from the paw of the lion, delivered him from the paw of the bear. So I'm just trying to say that it built up. This was something that David actively engaged and built up over time. So finally, I want to talk about uh, how David did prepare for the battle. So we're going to go on to verse 38, and it says here, well, I mean, before verse 38 says here, and Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." So Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head, and he also clothed him with a coat of mail. David fastened his sword, I guess Saul's sword, to his armor, and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. And David said to Saul, "I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them." So David took them off. You might think, anyone in that situation might think, maybe this guy's a bit crazy, because he's gonna go and fight. He's going to go to war. He's going to go and fight. Uh, he's gonna fight a 2 or 3 meter tall giant. He's gonna fight a literal giant, and he's not even gonna bring armor with him. So, and then we see how he prepared. Right, verse 40. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook. He went to the river. He picked out 5 stones. He put them in a shepherd's bag, in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand. And he drew near to the Philistine. That was how he prepared for battle. He prepared as he would for enhanced shepherd's duty. He didn't try to. I don't think he tried to worry too much about it. He didn't try to think it, and he certainly wasn't trying to become something he wasn't. I mean, he wasn't a soldier, right? So he didn't try. He came just as he was. He prepared as best as he knew how, and using the skills he had developed, he had built up since his youth. And sometimes we try to overthink things, and we try to do stuff the way that looks proper or right, I guess. But uh, we end up shoehorning stuff in, like, Saul trying to put armor on David to make him a soldier. But David wasn't a soldier. And even better, little did Saul realize that David was perfectly suited for his task, in fact, because Goliath was basically bringing a knife to a gunfight at 40 paces, metaphorically speaking. And God had prepared David for this day and much more. So we know how this story ends. It says here, then in verse 49, David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. Yeah, knife to a gunfight. And so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Now, sorry, just checking my notes here. Remember at this point here that David was rather, what's the correct word? Pedestrian. He was a bystander from the beginning. At first, he wasn't even supposed to be there. He could have just went in. He could have just done his, just give the cheese and the bread to his brothers and stuff like that, and just gone home. He wasn't supposed to stick around for long, but the moment he started getting curious about what the encampment was facing, what was happening here, he could have said, "Not my business," and gone home, but he didn't. He realized that when he started asking around, he realized that the cause was very important. Wait. Oh, this is not a short talk at all. It's so important. Anyway, the he realized that God's cause was so important, right? The cause here was so important that when nobody seemed to be stepping up to defend God's glory, he asked around, like, you want to do it? No. You want to do it? No. He finally said, fine, I'll do it. He finally volunteered himself for King Saul. And he didn't know anything about being a soldier, but God had already been preparing him by putting the lion and the bear before him to slay. So, what is the conclusion here? My conclusion, my encouragement for everyone tonight is that if you see something that you want to do for the Lord, and nobody else around you seems to be equally compelled, you dwell on it like David did. Make sure your why is correct first. No one seemed to be able to challenge his cause, the cause that he had called for, and stand on it. Don't dwell on why it cannot work. And there will be plenty of reasons, right? There will be plenty of reasons that people can put forth why something cannot work. And if anything else, focus on your cause, make sure it's correct, because it is what compelled you towards it. And finally, when the time comes to do the work, you put your best foot forward and you trust that the Lord has prepared you. It's my talk. I guess I passed to Pastor Colin.